right, beautiful people. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, A Radical Relationship, where we are talking all things faith and all things lifestyle. All right. So today I am super excited because we are starting a new series off this book. Ow. Ow. Ow, ow. I'm excited. So this book was actually gifted to me probably 5 or 6 years ago. Somebody who just wanted to be encouraging asked one of my friends about what would be something that would encourage me, and my friends, knowing me so well, suggested this book where I could learn from other women in the Bible. And I recently restarted reading the book after a few years for my quiet time, and just had this idea that, man, there's so much that can be gleaned from these women. So why not talk about it? So we're gonna talk about it, okay? So let's dive right in. The first woman from the Bible who is up is Ruth, okay? And so this first chapter, the message of Ruth is follow your heart to find your hope. So first, let's just start out with, where can you find the story of Ruth in the Bible? Ruth actually got her own book, y'all. Ruth got her own book. It's called The Book of Ruth, okay? So you can read up on Ruth from the Bible in the Book of Ruth. I think it may be only about 4 chapters. So it's short and sweet. Really great story about Ruth. If you've read the chapter, then you know she lost her husband, went back home with her mother-in-law Naomi, started working, found a new husband. He was great, all of that kind of stuff. But just want to point out, the Book of Ruth in the Bible is where you can read more about her story. So when we first start this book, in the beginning, which I'm sure some of you noticed, it kind of tells you like how, like, what the people's story can be used for. And for Ruth, it says for when you need to make a decision and don't know what to do. So just keep that in mind. So going through this chapter here, there were so many gems, and depending on how long this video ends up being, I may need to make it 2 parts, but it was really good. So I'm gonna just start talking through a few things within the chapter. 1, she said, when I married him, I thought I was the most favored woman in the world. And so one of the notes that I wrote here was, okay, let's think about where we're placing our value. Not to condemn this, because I mean, you should feel like you're the most favorite woman in the world, all within perspective. And so she mentioned how she had been married for a short time, so short that they didn't even have children yet, which I can relate to. And so when he died, she was all of a sudden alone. And so really what I wanted to point out there is that she goes from this high time in life to everything quickly being snatched from her. And perhaps you've experienced a season like that as well, when everything was going great and you were on one trajectory, and then all of a sudden your whole world is different. I can relate to that. Like, my marriage was short, we didn't have kids, and I even remember talking to my friends about changing my name and just saying like, yo, once I change my name, that's the last there is of this situation left. I have a bunch of memories, of course, and some physical stuff left around the house, but just like signs of the marriage, that was it. So I can relate to Ruth, that like, you were on the upward trajectory and then all of a sudden your world comes tumbling down. And so now she's faced with a decision. Do I go back to my family, or do I stay with Naomi? And the life lesson here is really critical because neither decision was wrong. And so that's what we can learn from Ruth's story, is that the two decisions that she was faced with, it wasn't a matter of biblical truth. What do I need to do based on the Bible? It's just a matter of making a calculated decision. But I could benefit from both. I could see upside and downside to both. I just really don't know what I should do in this situation. You know, it's not good or bad or right or wrong. I just don't know what I should do. And Ruth suggests that we follow our heart to find your hope. And so be sure to stay tuned, because later in the video, I'm going to talk about an amazing nugget that my friend Neka shared with me about the book of Ruth and why she loves it so much, that I was just like, that's very dope. But it was interesting to me that she mentioned, hey, follow your heart to find your hope, because she, in the story that's written from her perspective at least, it also mentions that they didn't have any hope when they got to Bethlehem. And so I was thinking, okay, why would you make a decision that wasn't glitz, that wasn't glam, that wasn't, oh my God, I'm so excited about this, you know, like they didn't even have any hope when they got there. Like, why would you choose the less sparkly route? And she said her heart felt things her eyes could not see, and it knew what my mind could not understand. And the best way that I can put that into words is just that sometimes you just know, okay? You just know. And that's all you got. So I have two examples of that from my life. One was when I was just, as a younger girl, having that conversation with my grandmom about, how do you know when you meet the one? How do you know? What is it that I should look for? What are the signs? And my grandma was straight up like, I don't know how to explain it. You just know, you know, like it's just something within you just knows. And I was just like, well, that ain't helpful. But okay. Second, did pertain to my divorce. I remember there just being, you know, like as we're faced with this huge decision of what's going to happen with our marriage, there's all these opinions coming from all of these different ways. And I was just like, all right, I just need to get away, and I just need to sit with God. And I just need to, you know, hear from him. And I had a moment on that trip when I just knew. Like, I couldn't explain it. I didn't hear an audible. I just knew, you know? And that was really cool too, because it also helped me to get back in touch with ways that I hear from God. So the other thing that I think about is like receiving the Holy Spirit, which is promised to us upon baptism. You don't feel anything tingly. You just know, okay? And that requires stillness and quiet to be able to figure out, okay, which direction am I being led in? There was a quote in the book when she said, when you make a God-honoring decision with your heart, God guides you with his hand. So the thing that I wanted to talk about with that quote and making a God-honoring decision with your heart is that, you know, I have really struggled with feeling like you don't really get a choice in Christianity. You know, when you choose to go the way of Christianity, you don't really get a choice. Like, Jesus is Lord, so he's your dictator. At the end of the day, he gets to decide what it is that you do, you know. And I honestly think my divorce has been so much of God debunking that theory that no, Shell, you do get a choice. People make choices every day, and I get to move within each decision that you make. And that really challenged my heart because Naomi's heart and Ruth's heart was to just, hey, I'm gonna make a decision, and I'm just gonna trust that God is going to meet me there. I'm gonna accept my lot no matter what happens. But they weren't like in this bitter place of necessarily blaming God. I mean, Naomi did mention, I think at one point in the book, like, hey, you know, this is what God has chosen. Amen. So she knew that, you know, it was still coming from God in one way or another, but there wasn't this bitter undertone. Whereas for me, I can feel like I can get so caught up in trying to seek God about a decision because I think I don't have a choice. But what happens is if I make a choice and then it doesn't turn out right or the way that I thought it was going to be, then I also get to blame God as opposed to taking responsibility for my own actions. So I think that's a way that this story can really be applied to, is that like when faced with these different decisions, no matter what way you move, when you make a decision to the best of your ability to honor God, God's hand is going to move and he's going to prove to be faithful. The book likened Ruth to Abraham because she was going back to a foreign land, and I can really relate to that. I had like a note here to talk about that, but more to come on that one. She said in this chapter, I knew I would be a foreigner to them, but I wasn't a foreigner to God. And that was really cool because I can definitely relate to feeling like an outsider in terms of like feeling like an anomaly. Feeling like, man, being young and divorced without kids, it's such a strange predicament to be in at my age. I'm not gonna find, or I haven't at least found, many women in that stage, you know, of having been married at 27 and is not married anymore and that kind of thing. And so that can feel like an anomaly. And so think about that in your life. What are ways that you can feel like a foreigner in your life as well, and be inspired by Ruth's story and how it can be applied? Because what she said was, I was a foreigner to them, but I wasn't a foreigner to God. God knew, God met her there like she was a foreigner. I am an anomaly in that way, and yet not an anomaly to God. So just was super encouraged by that. She talks about how she had found her place in the world and then it was taken away from her. So, you know, what was she to do? And so the question that I asked there is, what drives you when your situation is dire? And there's a quote here on page 9. She says, what drives you when your situation is dire? Is it fear? Is it worry? Is it frustration? Is it resentment? Is it bitterness? None of those emotions will take you in the right direction. Instead, look for love. Love will carry you forward. Follow your heart. And so, you know, I've had to fight for that in a lot of different ways. Like I can be led by a lot of different emotions, but if I don't allow myself to come back and be more centered on the right thing, none of those things are going to lead me to the ultimate result that I want. And I'm just going to go farther in the direction that's not necessarily where I want to go. So being reminded that God rewards faithfulness, and I have to be constantly reminded of that, because sometimes I can ask myself or ask God, okay, how much more faithful you want me to be, bro? You know, like those times in our lives where it's like, okay, haven't I proven that I'm gonna stay faithful? Can we let up, you know, on all of the foolishness going on in my life right now? Like, how much more faithful do I have to be? But being reminded that God rewards that, they were taken care of. And we can talk about Ruth and Boaz a little bit. If y'all follow me on social media, I posted one time just tripping out because Naomi told Ruth, hey, go in there and lay at his feet. Go in the, you know, kind of like let him know that you're available, and let's see what happens, you know. So I was just like chuckling, just making that synonymous with what that would look like today, because in today's world, for me and my friends, or even just like an older woman in my life that I look up to, I can see them being like, look now, go get your man now, okay? You know, like, stop acting crazy, go get your man, all right? That's something I would say to one of my friends, like, look, okay? And that I have said to my friends, you're gonna be looking crazy, okay? When he out here treating somebody else like a queen, you better start acting right. So it's funny to find those situations in the Bible. But she was just so taken care of. And when you go through the book of Ruth, you see that, like, along the way, they just made the practical decisions. Like, all right, we got to eat. She goes to work in the field, and they continue to see God's favor. The point that my friend Neka made was that you don't see God's name mentioned in this book at all in terms of like glorifying God. You know, God did this, God provided this kind of thing. But what you do see as you read through the story, and if you look through the lens, you see God moving, and you see God's faithfulness. Like, his name doesn't have to be mentioned. You see him moving all throughout their lives, all throughout their story, even when it seems completely hopeless. So what would that look like, you know, for us in today's world? Whether it's in our singleness, whether it's losing people that's close to us, not feeling fulfilled in different ways, giving up hope because you feel like you've done everything that you know to do, and a situation still isn't shaping out the way that you want it to look. Man, you know, like, how can I take a step back and look at how God is moving in this situation? God was so faithful to Ruth that Ruth ended up in the lineage of Christ. She's one of few women who are mentioned in Matthew 1 when the lineage of Christ is detailed. She's the great grandmother of David, if I wrote that down right. And David is the David, King David, a man after God's own heart. David wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Ruth and Boaz. So God took this desolate situation and he placed this woman in the lineage of Christ. Like, God was faithful, okay? And that honestly just like gives me so much hope right here in this moment, that like when her husband died, her world was shook, okay? Like, she didn't know what was about to happen and what was going on. The only thing that she could do is just keep making moves, and she ends up being in the lineage of Christ. Like, what the heck? So as you continue to maneuver through this chapter, there's a prayer that that her friends would know their own hearts. And her friends in this story is us. So I'm actually going to read that prayer. It says, God, my Redeemer, you are faithful and good. You love us and want the best for us. First, I pray that my friends, us reading this chapter, would know their own hearts. When they are in doubt or distress, help them to be sensitive to you. Speak to them through your spirit and help them to have courage to follow where you lead. And I pray that you would always reward them with hope. Amen. I pray that you would know your own heart. Okay, like, man, that is some really deep stuff, because oftentimes, and especially as I'm trying to figure out my next moves, I get asked, well, what do you want? What is it that you want? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what it is that I want. So for that prayer to be like, may you know yourself, may you be sensitive to what God is trying to save and you have the courage to follow where he is leading, ask yourself that question. Where is it that God is trying to lead me? Am I resisting disruption in my life that could be for the good? And so another point before we start to wrap up here, found on page 11, it says, where was I? So at the end of page 11, it says, she moved from the agony of questions that she could not answer to the reality of answers she could not escape. She felt a deep conviction that she was to stay with Naomi, and she followed that conviction. She moved away from the agony of questions that she couldn't answer into the reality of the answers she couldn't escape. So there may be just a lot of questions that you don't have the answers to, but there could be the other end of the spectrum where there's just things that you feel in your heart that you just can't deny that is there. Go with that, because those are the answers that you have. And there's a quote in here that says that convictions are not merely beliefs we hold. They are those beliefs that hold us in their grip. I can't let this thing go. I can't deny this. No matter where I move or what I try to do, this thing is right here at me. Like, I do not feel this is right, or I do feel this is right. You know, something in you that just won't let you be comfortable until you're walking in that space. Pay attention to those things. Following your heart with integrity can increase your influence with others was the second point that was being made. And so what that was, as you look back on the story of Naomi and even her having to return home, there was this kind of like awe of like, wow, you know, like she has been through a lot. There's a lot of respect there. So when you lead with integrity, other people see and they are influenced by your behavior for the better in that way. Point number 3, made in this book on page 14, remember to be humble and keep working as God blesses you. Don't get puffed up, essentially. Like when Ruth got there, she started working in the field, you know, just like everybody else. She was even picking up scraps at some point. There was no like, I've arrived, even when she got Boaz's attention. So stay humble is honestly the message there. And so we'll end on the note that she says here, the lesson I learned from Ruth as a woman is that I don't ever need to see myself as a victim of circumstances. Especially in a modern world with many more options than Ruth had, I can instead choose to have hope and look for a way to overcome challenges. I don't have to be defined by what's happened to me. Rather, I can follow God's lead and take action, and it will open the way to changing my circumstances and finding fulfillment and joy according to God's plans. Look, boo, you are not just the culmination of what has happened to you. That's not what this is, you know. Instead, like, you can take those things and apply those lessons, grow from those things, and then follow God's lead into your new reality. And that is so stinking refreshing. So discussion question number 7 is the one that I will leave us with, and it says, where in your life would you currently benefit from following your heart more? Ooh, that's a good one, because I am a very rational person. And so my comment to myself for that was, how can I be less rational and more faithful? And I'll talk about some of those decisions in upcoming videos. But Yeah, I think that's a great question. Where in life could you benefit from following your heart more? It's actually biblical when the Bible tells us, like, don't trust your heart, it's deceitful, it's wicked. But this is kind of a different twist on that. Where could you actually benefit from not being so legalistic in a certain way about trying to be rational and trying to create the risk, and just do what feels more natural according to how the Holy Spirit is leading you. Okay, and you may have to experiment with that a little bit and figure out what that is, but do it with the right heart. Okay, so that is Ruth. That is follow your heart to find your hope. That is a few little nuggets about how to make tough decisions and just be faithful in those. Hopefully, you all found that encouraging. I'm definitely excited to continue to dig in, because there's some of these women that I'm not just as familiar with. So I'm going to be learning more about their stories as well. So enjoy. If you are watching this video and haven't yet purchased the book, again, this is it, Wisdom from Women in the Bible. We'll be diving in, so stay tuned for more. Until next time, we are out. Bye, y'all.